Welcome back to Module 3, Reforming Ohio. Today our subject is John D. Rockefeller. Like many other Ohioans in the 19th century, Rockefeller was born outside of the state and moved here with his family when he was still just barely a teenager. He moved into an Ohio that was still largely rural and still largely focused on exporting agricultural products. Steamboats dominated this world, as did New Orleans, slavery, and cotton. Canals and railroads, however, had started to change the geography of the state. So Rockefeller came of age in an Ohio that was increasingly connected to New York City, was growing more urban every day, and began to shift from feeding people to building things. And Rockefeller had so much to do with that change, making Cleveland the state's preeminent city, transforming its industrial enterprises from commercialized agriculture to manufacturing, and inventing out of nothing a new world of large-scale, bureaucratic managerial organizations. He was the world's first billionaire, probably worth more than 4 times what Bill Gates is worth today. Rockefeller also founded one of the world's first multinational corporations and invented the oil industry. The world he created is largely the world we live in today. Cleveland put him in the position to accomplish all of that. Here's the earliest known photo of Rockefeller, taken in 1857 when he was just 18 and living in Cleveland. Within 13 years of this photo, Rockefeller would be well on his way to controlling the oil industry. Rockefeller was born in upstate New York in 1839. His father's nickname was Devil Bill, which accurately suggests what his character was. He was a womanizing alcoholic and traveling con man. He met his wife, John D's mother, when engaged to another woman, and he heard of a second family with a little bit of money and an attractive single young daughter. So Devil Bill broke his engagement to the first woman, who was poor, and schemed to meet the second woman. And he relied on his regular routine. He pretended to be unable to hear or to speak, and he carried around his neck a small chalkboard to converse with people. He appeared at the door of this family and, without speaking, managed to charm the young woman so much that soon after meeting they married. Now, how Devil Bill explained his miraculous recovery on their wedding night is unknown. Devil Bill was an unpredictable sort, traveling whenever and wherever, seemingly at a whim. As a con man, he had to travel far and wide, lest he run into one of his victims. And as an adult, John D. remembered those exciting days when Devil Bill would return home, entertaining everyone with tales of adventure and pockets full of cash. And then Devil Bill would disappear again, his exits as surprising and disruptive as his entrances. His mother was the opposite of Devil Bill, steadfast and determined. She was in fact a devout Baptist, always tithing to the church even though she had very little money herself. She valued the things that William Holmes McGuffey said she should value: thrift, hard work, sobriety. Now, Rockefeller's life changed abruptly when, in 1849, his father was accused of raping a woman in their New York hometown. And in 1853, one step ahead of the law, Devil Bill moved his family to the Cleveland area. Why Cleveland? Maybe because it was a growing city, a place well connected to railroad, canal, and lake transportation. Perhaps he could find work there easily. Or maybe, just maybe, because he had a mistress in Ontario, Canada, which was a relatively short trip across Lake Erie. Now, in Cleveland, Devil Bill listed himself in a directory as a botanic doctor. It's not a real thing. He was a snake oil salesman. Young John D. learned well from both parents. He loved the excitement, the risk, the greed that defined his father's life. Devil Bill's charms tempted the son. And yet, his mother was also important to him. He became obsessed with reliability, with security, control, and organization. Details mattered to him. He managed details, organized them, mastered them. In fact, he found liberation in working at a task repeatedly. He said later in life that I had a peculiar training in my home. It seemed to be a business training from the beginning. He meant that his father was a shrewd and cunning risk-taker who took advantage of people. His mother, meanwhile, was a dedicated person and persevered through constant trouble, focused every day on giving God an honest day's work. He combined both attributes, the sharp angle-playing exploiter who worked harder than anyone else. In 1855, Rockefeller's life changed abruptly again. His father wrote him a letter declaring that John D. was now head of the family, that Devil Bill had no money to send him to school to train as a minister, which was John D.'s goal. Devil Bill was in fact in Ontario, Canada, preparing to marry another woman and needed all of his money to start a second family. So John D. set out in Cleveland, a high school dropout, to look for a job. For 6 long, hot weeks in August and September, for 6 days a week, resting only on Sunday, Rockefeller knocked on every door he could and asked everyone he could for a job. Founded in 1796, Cleveland by the 1820s had begun to stagnate. Its distance from the Ohio River simply made it a hostile place for making money. The canals and railroads, however, changed all of that. And so by the 1850s, Cleveland was a boom town, bringing immigrants from Ireland and England and Germany, as well as migrants from New England. In 1860, there were some 43,000 residents, up from 6,000 in 1840. By 1890, the population had risen to 261,000, and Cleveland was the 10th largest city in the United States. So in 50 years, the population had increased from 6,000 to 261,000. Cleveland was, by the 1850s, a transportation hub, sending Western commodities like grain, lumber, iron ore, and salt to the east, and sending Eastern finished manufactured goods to the west. So Cleveland was different from Cincinnati in this crucial respect. Cincinnati collected the unfinished agricultural products of the Miami Valley, transformed them into finished goods, and then shipped them to markets. And Cincinnati profited from its close ties to the pan-Mississippian world. Cleveland, in contrast, by the 1850s, was a shipping hub that transported goods and materials for others to finish, for others to consume. It profited not from the pan-Mississippian world, but from its east-west ties, specifically to New York City and Chicago. And so Rockefeller, day after day, week after week, walked the unpaved streets of Cleveland in 1855, the hot late August weather highlighting the fact that Cleveland had no sewers. He spent most of his time in the thriving Flats neighborhood. The Flats neighborhood is where the Cuyahoga River, twisting and turning throughout the city, meets Lake Erie. Today, the Flats is a constantly changing entertainment district, suffering through good times and bad, experiencing spasms of interest and indifference in waterfront bars and restaurants. In the 1850s, though, the Flats was a thriving, dynamic place, full of iron foundries, lumber mills, warehouses, and shipyards, as well as sewage, working-class immigrant housing, saloons, and, of course, cholera. Rockefeller, just 16 years old in 1855, found work as a bookkeeper in a place called Hewitt and Tuttle. Why did he get the job? He had the best penmanship of all the candidates, an essential skill in the workplace then because it was important that bookkeepers enter information into a ledger in a clear and consistent way. He started on September 26, 1855, a day he forever after celebrated as Job Day, a day he loved even more than his own birthday. And payday came on December 31st, 1855. He worked as an unpaid apprentice for several months while he proved his value to the firm. Hewitt and Tuttle was a commodity trading business. That is, they shipped raw material from one place to another. It was unique among pre-Civil War businesses. Most usually just traded one commodity, wheat, for example, or coal, or pork. But Hewitt and Tuttle traded a variety of commodities and pioneered in trading iron ore from Lake Superior. Iron ore is the basic building block of steel. John D., as a bookkeeper, entered figures into an account book. A fairly mindless task he repeated minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day. He found this task liberating and, in fact, even enlightening. And here's what he learned. Today we call it analytics, the science and art of using numbers to expose inefficiencies and to measure performance. Numbers, Rockefeller believed, saved people from following the bias of tradition, from doing things the way they've always done it without thinking about the consequences. And numbers saved people from emotion as well, keeping them safe from the liars, the cheats, and the con men of the world, from the devil bills of the world, in other words. He also learned about logistics, or at least that's what we call it today. Hewitt and Tuttle depended on the railroad and the telegraph, the crucial technology of the day. There weren't many businesses and far, far fewer places in which a teenager could use cutting-edge technology every day to touch it, experiment with it, learn how to use it to gain an advantage over a competitor. Now let's emphasize this point. Cleveland was one of the few places where Rockefeller could have gained experience with this new technology. As a teenager, for example, he learned how to ship granite from Vermont to Cleveland, first learning it the way Hewitt and Tuttle had done it in the past, and then learning how to do it better, increasing the firm's profit by using the telegraph to learn new information and act on it quickly. I emphasize the importance of place for a reason. Place still matters. To illustrate, let's consider Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple and the guiding force behind its transformation from a garage-based enterprise to a global brand. Jobs was raised in the right place to learn about computers. He was raised in Silicon Valley, the one place in the world in the late 1950s and early 1960s that had surplus computer parts literally just lying around. So much so that someone started a business collecting the cast-off parts, storing them in a big warehouse, and selling them cheaply. Jobs worked there as a teenager. He got to touch the technology that most people in the world never saw. He could afford to buy it. He could afford to experiment with the pieces, ruin them, and then go buy some more. No other place offered that kind of opportunity. If he were raised anywhere else on the earth, Apple doesn't get created, and I wonder if Jobs becomes Jobs. He might have been famous for something else, but unlikely he would have been famous for computers. Place is that important. And Rockefeller found himself in the right place, mainly because of his father's cheating, lying ways, but no matter. Rockefeller found Cleveland and learned from it in a way that few other cities could have taught him. And Cleveland taught him how to do this. This is a photo of Rockefeller's first oil refinery in Cleveland, circa 1865. What do you see in this photo? What do you hear? Can you smell anything? What words would you use to describe this place? Does the site strike you as the foundation of the modern oil industry? If so, why is there a cow on the premises? And he took this place and within 10 years made it into this. Yes, it's the same place. This photo illustrates well what Rockefeller wrought. In 1870, he incorporated his business called Standard Oil, and even then it was the largest refining capacity of any firm in the world. By 1882, Rockefeller controlled 90% of American oil refineries and pipelines. By 1889, he controlled 90% of all oil distribution and one-third of all oil wells. He built the world's largest managerial hierarchy that coordinated, monitored, and planned the activities of an integrated global enterprise. And here in the photo, you can see the technology, the infrastructure, the environmental problems, the working class homes in the deep background, and all that Rockefeller's global enterprise entailed. So how did he do it? How does Cleveland figure into the answer? And what were the consequences of his actions? I'll answer these questions in the next lecture.